The last talk for track 2 is Oh, the Humanity, Social Engineering in the 21st Century. Our speaker is Teddy Ansink from Avertium. Teddy, it's all yours.
Hello, thank you very much for having me today. I appreciate it. Today we're going to talk about social engineering, and we've all dealt with a little bit of social engineering being in the IT industry. First, I'm going to give you a little bit of my background. I started out in the US Navy. I served just under 5 years. And then after the Navy, I went to the University of Tennessee, where I got my bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. Out of college, I managed to get a job with IBM, and I covered the state of Tennessee working on power servers. And there was a whole lot of travel involved, and starting a new family, it was very difficult. So I found my second job with Pilot Flying J, the gas company. For them, I did application development, and I was also a QA analyst. It was a very rewarding job in that I realized that there were some gaps in my education, such as databases and application development and permissions for accounts within an application and how Active Directory related to that. So I managed to get in with Pilot Flying J, and I felt like this was a good way to really round out my familiarity with all those different technologies that I hadn't worked with before. And then while I was at Pilot Flying J, I started my master's degree, my MBA from King College. And while I was at Pilot, Sword and Shield came to me, and Sword and Shield then became Avertium. They said, hey, what do you know about cybersecurity? And I said, well, I don't really know too much. And they said, well, come on, we'll show you the ropes. And so they brought me on and kind of taught me everything I needed to know. And from there, I've just hit the ground running. So some of the responsibilities that I have is I function as the virtual chief information security officer for healthcare, financial, and federal industries. So I have a couple hospitals out in California that I've been managing for just under 4 years now. I also go around the country and do assessments and audits on different environments and networks. So map data flows, look at how information's stored, how it's protected, how it's destroyed. And then I also help with the remediation of the findings from these assessments and audits. So develop roadmaps, maybe a 3-year timeline where we're looking at different projects that we can have spun up and what things can be done in parallel and the best ways to remediate the findings that come out of these assessments. And then the last thing I do is the social engineering portion. And when I talk about the social engineering, we always think about phishing expeditions or someone sitting at home and trying to log into your network or trying to extract some passwords or get credentials. The part that I do, which is a little bit different, is I actually go on site and I walk through the front doors of these companies before they have any idea who I am. And I actually go into the building and extract the information physically. So I'll go and take a hard drive out of a desktop computer or have a receptionist give me access to one of the computers in the back because I say I work with IT. And they bring me back there, and then I get left alone with the computer for a little while that's on the network. So, and I'll give some more examples of that and how that's completed as we go through here. So what is social engineering? This is 6 different types of social engineering, starting with phishing, which we're all very familiar with. That's emails being sent out trying to get some type of information voluntarily given up by the person, or having you go to a website or redirect to some type of site that you weren't expecting, and by maybe renaming a web address that looks very similar to what you thought it would be. Eavesdropping is another one. That's just, being in the vicinity and hearing someone talk and listening to the type of information that they're exchanging between another person. Vishing, and then there's baiting. These are 2 more types of social engineering that are very similar to phishing. It's just more targeted and direct. Then there's also tailgating. This is one that I use very, very often. That's when someone goes through a door that needs badge access or some type of biometric code or some type of access that isn't just open to everyone. And when they go through, they walk through the door, but they don't make sure it closes behind them. And so you just walk through the door behind them, tailgate right through, and pretend that you know what you're doing and gain access to the spaces. And then the last one being quid pro quo. That's where you just pose as someone who belongs in the space. Maybe you dress up as a maintenance guy and you're in the building trying to do maintenance on the the building, and people leave you alone because they assume he looks like he's doing maintenance. He knows what he's doing. I don't need to challenge this guy. Some of the scary threats, and I've gathered these from KnowBe4. There's been an exponential growth in the ransomware plague. So this isn't going anywhere. You can hire groups to do this for you, and it says here it ranges from $10 to a few $1,000s. It all depends on who the target is, the number of assets that you're looking to utilize, and the type of ransom that you're trying to get and sell back to the company. Then there's also pseudo ransomware. It's like ransomware on the surface, but underneath, they're just trying to get into the organization. They're trying to gather data, extract data, and sometimes it's for money, but sometimes it's just to wreak havoc and watch the world burn. Another one would be phishing automation. So this is with bots and intelligent scraping of social media and dark web, and it makes spear phishing hard to identify. So phishing automation, we even do this sometimes internally. We do these phishing campaigns where we're testing our own employees, sending out all the emails, seeing who's going to click on these links. It's the same thing that the attackers are going to do. They can utilize programs and applications similar to what we're using and just push out hundreds of emails all at once, and then see if they can get 10% to click, and then they have success. Another one is the extortion scams. So instead of getting files back, what they do is they kind of like blackmail people, and they extort one document at a time, and it's much more intricate, and they try to get, it's similar to ransomware, but they're not sure about what exactly the data is that they've acquired. That's why they do it one document at a time, and it's much more drawn out. They also can mess with search results on Google. So there's companies where you can go and pay them, and they will search your keywords very frequently, which will drive you up in the search results. And then by doing that, your websites can appear higher in the search results, garnering it more clicks. So by tampering with the results of search engines, they're able to affect the popularity of their websites. A new one is mobile malware. Well, relatively new. So this is targeting smartphones and mobile devices. This is something that's hasn't been looked at in the past too much because they've been hard to utilize. But now that cell phones and mobile devices, tablets, and everything else are so prevalent, it's becoming more common, because if you can write a piece of code for a tablet or a mobile device, then it can infiltrate hundreds of thousands of them now. Whereas before, when they weren't as prevalent, there wasn't as many targets. And then the last one here was blameware and false flag operations have increased. And this one was identified by the European Union, and they declared that cyber attacks as an act of war. And so this is where the propaganda between countries, you've probably seen some of this with Russia. Also, the Ukraine has been involved in some of this stuff. So it's having malicious attacks and then saying, oh, is this person or is that person, and maybe not even having any evidence to prove one way or another. Perception of an attacker. So I really like this picture. I don't know if I don't know the demographic of the whole audience, but if you notice, he's wearing a Nintendo Power Glove on his right hand there. He's got some kind of dot matrix green screens in the back, and probably running some type of DOS. But this is what I think of, like when I talk about stereotypical hackers and things like that to my friends or to my parents. They think of a guy sitting in a basement. He's a loner, has no friends, and he's just got all these computers and hacking and writing code and trying to log into systems that he's not supposed to be into. So remote hacking. So it's often thought that someone who's hacking is in a remote location. They're nowhere near on site. which that's where I come in and I show that I can actually walk through your front doors, and I can do as much, if not more damage by coming through your front doors and getting into your spaces as a hacker who's sitting at home trying to log in virtually to the network. They also use a computer. So one thing I do is when I come in the front doors, I don't actually use my computer at all. I'll access one of the computers that's there, plug in a thumb drive, see what kind of files I can get off of the computer. I went into a hospital one time and they had these kiosks set up for family members of patients and things like that, so that if they're there for an extended period of time, they can use a computer and they can get to the internet, maybe do, I don't know, some banking if they need to. I don't know that you'd want to do banking on one of these. But what I found was I could actually load operating systems on the USB drives and go in and plug it in and reboot the computer to the operating system that was on my USB drive. And when I did that, I was then on the internal network with that computer. They didn't have it segregated out. They didn't have any controls on these computers. They were just, there was no type of asset tracking or endpoint protection. It was very vulnerable. I was even able to load some peer-to-peer software on there, and they could access torrenting websites and download torrents and get all of the software and information that they needed there. They didn't even have to bring anything on site. They could have just done it on the computer itself. And then who are these hackers? Stereotypically, there's someone with a grunge personality using exotic software who is a loner or an introvert. And that's not the case at all. I went to a law firm up in Seattle, and they had, I think it was 8 floors between 2 high rises. And so I was able to get to all the floors by having a personality and getting into the elevator and having people actually buzz me up to the floor with their employee badge, because when you went into the elevator, in order to access a floor, you had to have a badge that garnered you access to that floor. So by going in and having a smile and looking like I knew what I was doing, wearing a suit, very, very well dressed, people automatically assumed, oh, this guy, sure, he could work for the law firm. He obviously knows what he's doing. He knows where he's going. And they would just happily buzz me through. One technique I found that worked was if I would carry a drink tray in one hand with 4 black coffees from Starbucks, very cheap, and then I have my briefcase in the other hand. So everybody wants to be helpful, and my hands are very full. And so when I walked into the elevator, they said, oh, what floor are you going to? Oh, let me get that for you. And then they would push the button. Never asked me for a badge. Never asked me, what's your name? I don't recognize you, any of that stuff. So I was able to get to all the floors and walk around while I was there. You know, they say they're a loner or an introvert. Getting up to the floor is where you want to be the extrovert. But once you get up to the floor, you don't want people to talk to you. So I would take a set of earbuds, and I don't know if you've ever noticed somebody walking down the halls of your office, and if they had a set of earbuds in, you're probably not going to stop them and say, hey, what are you doing? How's your day going? It's a good way to get people to leave you alone. So once you get up to the floor, you do things to make people stay away and make it look like you are not interested in engaging with anyone else. And you can just access whatever you want to, and people just leave you alone, which is totally opposite from what you want them to do. So I have this video. We're going to try and play it on through another way, and I will see if I can share it. Oh, let's see. Share.
No pressure at all, Teddy. No pressure.
Right, yeah. All right. Can you see that?
It is on your other screen.
Is that working?
Yes, it is. No sound though. Is there sound to this, Teddy? Because there's no sound coming through the speakers. Hey, Teddy, if you can take the link to that and copy and paste it into the chat, so all the others can watch it on their time, because there's no sound coming through on this video. Yeah, I saw the comments about no sound. Teddy, I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is not any sound coming from the video.
Oh
If you
no.
could just copy and paste the link into the chat, and that way everybody can catch up with that on their time.
I apologize.
Hey, no problem. No problem.
I was just letting it play. Um,
That is a great way to burn 11 minutes and 35 seconds, though.
how do, let's see here. There we go. Did that go through?
You are not back on the slide deck that you were on. You're still showing the YouTube video. There you go. Okay. And the next slide.
Okay.
So don't forget to put the link to that video in the chat for everybody.
Okay. Let's see here. Where's chat? All right, I'll do that in a minute. I'll just give you a brief rundown. So basically what happened was he ends up sitting down with the woman who does some social engineering, and she tells him, she gets some basic information, his name, maybe like where he's from, and maybe he has a daughter, I think, something like that. And so what she does is she ends up pulling up videos of like babies crying. And so she has those playing in the background. And then when she calls in, she presents herself as a mother who is stressed out because of the baby crying, and she's just trying to get some banking done, but her husband has all the information. And she really needs the help of the person who answered the phone to access the accounts, because her husband must have changed the passwords and she's not exactly sure how to get them, and her husband isn't available for a phone call so that she can get into the accounts. So she's able to go in, reset the passwords to the account. She's able to get balances, transfer money, and she basically just gets free access to everything. And all she knew was his name and some basic information about his family. So and she does it real time on the phone. And it's very alarming how easily she's able to get in and garner some type of respect from the person answering the phone, just because she's playing these videos of babies crying and things like that in the background. It's pretty unbelievable. And so I just like to show that, so that people usually are pretty surprised at the amount of information she's able to get from the bank without actually proving she is anyone associated with the account in any way. So this is an example right here of one of the problems that we see is employees' desire to be helpful. So this is a great thing. Having helpful employees within your company is a great culture. However, a lot of employees think that being helpful means that you don't challenge people you don't recognize on your floor. So if I were working and I saw someone new on the floor, instead of just like saying hi or giving a head nod as you walk by, introducing myself and trying to say, is there some place that I can show you, or are you looking for a certain office? And meeting that person is actually a lot more helpful than just walking by and leaving them alone and not bothering them. It makes them feel more welcome to the company. It makes them, if they are lost, it gives them that opportunity to ask for help. But a lot of employees think of like challenging someone like that as a negative thing, whereas as a new employee, it would actually be inviting to have someone come up and talk to you and get to meet another person. So it's up to the employees to challenge unfamiliar people. Most people won't approach a stranger and would prefer they would help them if they needed assistance, and they also hold doors for them, which then leads to the tailgating that I mentioned earlier, which is the #1 way for me to gain access to a business site by far. All right. Okay. Respect for authority. So phishing attacks often spoof the email address of a boss or supervisor. And this is one way that attackers will try to get information, is by saying, hey, I'm your superior. I need this information now. I'm in a place where I can't go and grab it. I need you to send it to me. So I had a client in the Nashville area, and the administrative assistant she received an email, and the email had a couple of letters just switched, and it was very hard to notice unless you were actually really paying attention. And it said, hey, I'm in a meeting. I need you to send me a list of all of the employees, their salaries, and bonuses for the year. And I need it in a spreadsheet. I need it now, and I'm in this meeting. I can't get it. And so this assistant went and pulled all that information, put it in a spreadsheet, and tried to send it to him 3 different times. The reason that she tried 3 times is because every time she tried to send it, they had a DLP solution in place, which is data loss prevention. It prevents sensitive information from exiting the network unless it's encrypted or sent through some form that's secure. And because every time she tried to send it, it was just attached to an email with no type of encryption, the DLP appliance blocked it. So she did this 3 times until IT got an alert each time. And so then IT went to her and said, hey, you can't send this out. And then upon further investigation, it was determined that the email address that was used was made to look like her boss's email address. And her boss wasn't in any meeting or anything like that. He was totally unaware of what was going on. And it was just a malicious entity trying to extract information from the company, and she was voluntarily giving it up because she did not notice that the email address had been spoofed or was false. A possibility for reward. So this is another way that attackers will get people to go to malicious websites. We ran a campaign at one of my hospitals where we put up QR codes in the break room, and it said, complete this quick survey and you'll get a free hamburger from McDonald's or Burger King or whatever. And so what we found was that people would go in there and they would take their phones and go to the website, had no idea what website it was or who posted the flyers. And when they went to the website, it would get information from their phone, and it was all over a free hamburger. Really a minor reward in any case. And but we got a ton of employees going in there and just hitting the QR code with their phone. And they really had no idea where it took them. So you can get to malicious websites and things that way, where people are trying to scrape information and data mine, and you'll give up some information that you don't intend to. Here are some ways to avoid becoming the victim of social engineering. So targeted training. The #1 weakness within pretty much every company is going to be the employees. And that's only because we get complacent with day-to-day activity and doing completing our workflow and making sure that our primary job gets accomplished. And we typically recognize most of the people that are in the workspaces with us, and it's just easy to be going with the flow and not always aware of everything going on around us. So employees need to be trained, and most companies are doing a very good job of phishing these days. So there's usually always some type of phishing expedition that's going on or has just occurred, gathering metrics from those, but also training for different types of social engineering and different ways of combating that is important. So, and that's a good point. No one is in the workspaces these days. You're definitely right about that. So uh, that's the link for the video right there. Just got that in there. All right. Another way is to restrict peripherals and have a clean desk policy. So I mentioned that law firm that I went to in Seattle. When I went up there, they had locked offices for all the attorneys. However, none of the doors were locked. So when I gained access to the floors, which I shouldn't have gotten access to the floors, but once I had, all the doors were open. And when I went in, there were piles of papers that had invoice numbers and sensitive information pertaining to each case, court documents, everything else. So once I got in, because there was no clean desk policy, there was sensitive information everywhere. So I was able to, there was more information that I could have carried out. Another thing is restricting peripherals. So we always recommend that you lock down USB drives and prohibit the use, or at least restrict the use to where you're using encrypted USB drives, just in case one gets lost and it's got some sensitive information on it, it can't be retrieved. But one way that attackers can bypass some of those controls is by having a USB drive that mimics drivers for a peripheral. So say I plug in a USB drive and it's telling the computer, hey, this is a keyboard, so install this driver. But actually the driver is malicious, something malicious that gets into your network and extracts information. So it's a way of bypassing USB controls that may be in place, because we're always allowing peripherals to be connected and utilized on a computer. And then the final one is empowering employees. So if you see someone in the spaces that you don't recognize, people should feel empowered to go up to them and say, hey, my name is so-and-so, and it's a pleasure to meet you. What department are you with? Is there anything I can help you with? And it makes people feel more welcome to the company, and it may help them get around a little bit if they're not familiar with where they're at. All right. So that's going to, I've got quite a bit of time left. Let's see here. All right, so there was another one that I went to recently where I went up to the offices, and I was able to walk through by tailgating and get into the spaces, and it was the hospital. When I got up there, I was actually able to access a lot of the doctor's offices, and these doctor's offices did not have locked doors because they were within the hospital, and they thought, well, we're probably secure. So once I got into the doctor's offices, there were computers there unlocked, which is another huge gap that I typically always find when I go on site. Is people will use their computers and there may not be a lock timeout on their computers, and they'll get up and leave, and they'll think, oh, I'm just going to go to the bathroom, and they'll be gone for, I don't know, 5-10 minutes. And in that amount of time, I could sit down and pretty much have my run of the internal network through their computer because they left it logged on and connected, and it's just sitting there waiting to be used. So that's one way that's very easy to get information, is by finding these unlocked and unsupervised terminals that you could just log on to or sit down at. Another thing I always find is if I go into a company and I start turning over mouse pads and keyboards, inevitably I always find a sticky note with passwords and logins written on it. And this is something that you never want to have. And I swear, if I go start looking within 5 minutes, I can almost always find a sticky note with this type of information written down. And this is a huge, huge risk. You never want to have your clear text passwords or have anything just available like that, to where people can turn over a mouse pad and then get into all of your accounts with the computer that's sitting right there, and they're able to just access whatever they need to. So do you guys have any questions or anything like that? Let's see, QA. You talk about a time where you attempted entry and it didn't go well. What did an employee do to successfully prevent? Okay, so unfortunately, I have been very successful. I haven't had a case where I wasn't able to access the spaces. Now, sometimes it may have taken 1 or 2 tries, When I went to Seattle and I was trying to go to the 8 floors that were up in the towers, there were 2 floors that were sea-level floors. And so you had to actually have an office on that floor, and only those people could badge to those floors. So it was a very small subset of people who could actually even get to those floors. So it took a few attempts riding up and down the elevator in order to find someone who would get off on that floor. And when I did, the gentleman was very preoccupied with whatever was on his phone. And so I was able to let him kind of go down the hallway a little bit. Just so happened I was the last one in the elevator at that point. So there wasn't anybody watching me to see, hey, why did you just sneak off the elevator? So I let him get down the hallway a little bit. The door started to close. I hit the door open button. The doors reopened, and then I was able to just walk out. He was so far down the hallway, he didn't really pay any attention after that. Not that he paid any attention when he was right next to me. And so I was able to get off and get into the spaces. And these were the only 2 floors that were like really, really difficult to get to because of these the personnel restrictions on getting to them. But I was still able to get there. One of the things this was one of the things that was the least enjoyable about doing this type of work is when I briefed the client afterwards and I said, I was able to get everywhere, and I told them the whole story. They said, how were you able to get to the sea-level floors, these 2? And I said, well, this gentleman, walked down the hall. I went off after him. And so then they come back with a directory of all of their employees with employee pictures. And they said, I want you to point out the people who have allowed you access. And so they actually made me sit down and identify who most of the people were. And they've paid for the work. And so of course I have to abide by that. But it's also, I'm not doing this to try to get anyone in trouble. I'm doing it because I enjoy the work, and because it's beneficial for these companies to see where these gaps are in security. But it makes you feel like the bad guy when you've got to actually point someone out and say, this is what happened. Now, one thing I also do is I usually carry a pen in my pocket, and it's got a Bluetooth, it's got a 1080p camera, like a pinhole camera on it. It's got audio as well. And so I usually carry that, and then I have that turned on, and then I just could turn over the video, and they can see everything that I did. They can see all the people that I saw, and just basically they have all the information that they need, and I don't have to turn people in and point them out. Another thing that I was able to do was when I went to this is a separate law firm. This was down in LA. They had all the precautions that you would need, special badge access, all that. Then they had this one room that was kind of their like super secure room. It had a cipher lock on the door, and there were 8 employees who had access to this. That's it, only 8, and it was the cipher lock. And they said, well, you'll never get in this room, so you may as well just not worry about it. Well, I was able to access this room, and when you got into it, it had motorized filing cabinets in the middle. They were huge motorized things that would slide. You push a button, and so around the outside, it was a rectangle that you could walk around the filing cabinets, and then there were cubicles along the walls. So what I did was I got into this room, and I went to the right, and I started going around the perimeter, and I just did a lap, and nobody said anything to me. And with there only being 8 employees, obviously I didn't look the part because they know who each other are. There's only so many of them. So once I did one lap, I was like, well, what am I going to do? So I managed to duck into the filing cabinets for a little while and go through some stuff in there. I even sat down at one of the desks and pretended like I was just working. And then I finally said, well, I don't know what else to do. I've gotten into everything. I guess I'll see what it takes to get caught. So I ended up doing 5 laps. I just started walking in a circle around the perimeter. I did 5 laps within that filing cabinet area until someone said, can I help you? You look lost. And I said, oh, I was just looking for the so-and-so. I didn't see their desk though. And they said, oh, they're not even in here. You're not supposed to be in here. And they just escorted me to the door and said, take care. The door, once I walked out I was still in the spaces for the company. I wasn't down with the receptionist or anything like that. I was still in the workspaces. So they just let me go right out into the areas that I wanted to be in, where I wanted to gather more information. Whereas what they should have done was said, oh, let me take you down to the front desk where someone there can help you and they can page the person that you're looking for. But that never happened. I've never had that happen. And it's a little bit disheartening how much information and how much access I'm able to get. But the only way to combat that is with training and teach employees that being helpful is a great thing, but security is also very important. There was one time where I got stopped a couple of times, but I had already gained access to it and they recognized me as coming through a few times. So I would walk through the office and they say, well, what are you doing? Who can I get for you? And then I had one lady that eventually, after like 2 or 3 times she stopped me, she started following me and she got on the phone. And I usually have a phone number for an employee. And if I get stopped or the police are called, I can say, this is my contact. They can verify who I am, what I'm doing, and like my get out of jail free card. So I make sure that I always have that contact at the ready. And if it ever comes to it, I can call them and they can vouch for who I am and that everything's okay. So are there any other questions? Yes, I just did answer live. All right. Okay. Did you ever get caught? I've never been caught like with information in my hand. I've never been stopped and had the police called. I've always been able to just talk my way out of it and say, oh, I'm sorry, I must be in the wrong place. And they just kind of let me go. Likewise, I've never had anyone stop me and actually escort me out of the spaces. They just said, oh, they're down this way. And they just kind of tell me where to go. So I've never had anyone actually take control and say, let me get you to where you need to be, or someplace that's kind of outside of all the employee spaces and really remove me from the situation and make other people aware. So that's another thing, is that some companies have, like the law firm that I went to in Seattle, they have a thing where they have phone alert, to where if somebody's noticed in the spaces, you can call this phone number and say, so-and-so's on this floor, they look like this, and it'll send out an alert to all employees and say, hey, there's this person that's not recognized, and they may be malicious, or they may be unauthorized, and we need to check it out. And so then that will prompt reaction from employees, or there's a group of security personnel as well, or who are identified as security personnel, and they can go and investigate it a little more. We had a team member digging under a fence. No one stopped him. They just watched. Yes, so there's a lot of things that you can do once you get into these spaces, and people will just look at you, and if they think you're an employee, they'll just let it go. I got into an architecture firm, and they had huge designs and drawings and drafts for all these different buildings and sensitive data in their offices. And I went into the office of, I think it was their CTO or CIO, and his office was there. He was not there for the day. It had all glass walls. I turned on the lights, sat down at his desk, and I mean, I don't know what he looked like, but I assume he didn't look like me. And I just sat there, and I pulled out my own laptop and set it down. And then I went around to some of the other areas, and there were some desktops. I was able to take those desktops and bring them in there. I took them apart, took the hard drives out of them. And so then when I ended up leaving that afternoon, I had sat down in the office and pretended like I was working. And then I had even taken a piece of like poster board type stuff and made a little triangle thing and put my name on it. So I had my name on the desk. And when I left that afternoon, I had a briefcase full of hard drives from the computers that had been sitting around. Now I didn't take any of the computers that were actually being used by employees. They had an area where they did repairs and things like that. And so I actually went back there, and there were people manning the desk. I walked right by them, went back to the repair area where they had computers and things like that, just hanging out. And I take them. I would grab a large desktop computer. I carry it through the office over to my office. I would open it up, take it apart, get the hard drive out, close it back up, and I would carry it back across the office. I did this 5 or 6 times, and nobody ever said anything. So it was very unfortunate that nobody challenges you, especially when you're carrying a desktop computer or something like that. It's very abnormal. Have you ever had an accomplice in these exercises? I have not. However, I think that could be very helpful in some cases. I don't think it would be helpful if trying to get to the floor if you needed someone's help. Because if I walked in and I had my hands full and I was with someone I knew, they would just assume that the person I knew would push the button to get to the floor. So in that case, you would both have to appear busy to where you can't push the button or you need some type of assistance. Now, where it could be helpful is once you get to the floor, because then you have someone that you can interact with and you look like you actually have the support or the camaraderie with another employee, and therefore you have like kind of power in numbers, and you can really look like you know what you're doing and you know where you are, and you can have that back and forth dialogue, and it can really solidify the opinion of other employees when they see you that you actually have been there before and know where you are and belong. And that's another thing is when I found when I would go into the spaces, having a sense of purpose and walking with like I knew where I was going. If you're wandering around and kind of looking around and like, oh, I don't know where I am, looking for signs or something, people are going to stop you and say, hey, where are you trying to go? But if you walk with a purpose, even if you make a wrong turn, you just go. A lot of times people won't stop you. And this is what I found when I went to this one place where they had an HR department that was behind locked doors. And I accidentally went through this door. I wasn't intending to go back there. But I passed through the door and I walked in and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in this small little office where there's all these people in cubicles, but there's only like half and they're all on standing desks so they can see everything going on. And I walk in and they all look at me. And then I froze for just a second and then I just started walking like I knew what I was doing. And as soon as I did, they all just went right back to their work and left me alone. Not a single one said anything to me. And it's a small office where only certain people were in there and they obviously didn't know me. So they should have said something to me and none of them did. And I went in there and I sat down at a desk that wasn't being utilized and just hung out for a little while. Would you say
you had somebody ask a question of how does somebody get into social engineering like this?
So I managed to get into it by coming into Sword and Shield, which now Avertium, and this is just kind of part of the offerings that we do. And actually, a lot of times we don't include these. We do what's called a strategic security assessment, an SSA. And there was a time where we would do a lot of the on-site social engineering with the SSA, but it's something that we've kind of gotten away from, especially with everything being remote right now. Going on site and doing these is not a thing that's occurring. But I did it for the first time and I really enjoyed it, and I found out I was really good at it. So I actually started doing it for my clients. I said, hey, I'm going to fly in. I'll get there on a Monday. I'll probably get there by 1 or 2 in the afternoon. I'll come straight from the airport and just come in here and see what I can get into, and I'll give you a report on it. And I just liked the thrill of going in and seeing where I could get. I think it shines a lot of light on areas that you don't expect to have some type of visibility on, and it's a type of attack that you never really expect or think that somebody's just going to come through my front door and get my information. I don't believe that, and they're always amazed at the amount of information I can get, the amount of access I can get. I do a lot of picture taking on my phone instead of actually taking the documents and things, and I turn all of those over to the client. I don't keep anything on my phone or the pen that I also maintain. I turn over all those videos, and then I write up an executive summary about everything that occurred. So it was just a little value add that I liked to give to my clients because I enjoyed doing the type of work, and it also provided some good stories. So, but how would you get into it? I think that's probably the best way is to start getting into some type of cybersecurity or security role. And then Identify areas where, like when you're doing an assessment, where you're trying to identify gaps in the security within the company, that this is a type of gap that isn't normally considered and is normally prevalent. The only problem with it is I can't go, when I'm going to go do an SSA, I can't go and do 3 days on site questioning everybody and doing interviews and then try to do the social engineering. It's something that has to be done up front when nobody knows you. Otherwise, you're not going to get like a true to form results. So that's why when I landed, I would go straight from the airport, go right to the company, and I would spend a few hours up there just going through all of their offices and getting into spaces where I shouldn't. And then when I come in the next few days, people are like, "Oh, yeah, I saw you up here the other day." Yeah, you did, and you should have stopped me, but you didn't, and so I actually got all your information. So that's the other thing about it is you can't. It's hard to do it for your own company. People recognize you, and they know that you work there, and you're a familiar face at that point. So being a consultant and having a lot of different contracts that I work on and a lot of different projects, it warrants itself to a lot of different engagements like this, and that's how I got involved in this. So, all right. Does anybody else have any questions? How are we doing on time?
I get about 14 minutes.
All right. Let's see. And all right. And I guess that takes us to my last slide. So thank you very much. I appreciate you guys having me. It was a pleasure to speak with you. I guess I'll give you back a little bit of extra time here. I didn't intend to, but I got through it a little quicker than I expected. So,
Hey, Teddy, thank you very much for your time and your expertise.